Area Schools Board of Education. This meeting is officially called to order. Please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board members in attendance tonight include Director Kelleher, Director David Anderson, Chair Baker, Director Carly Anderson, Director Lind, and Director Thompson. The board is joined by Superintendent Michael Baumann and members of the Executive Cabinet, Bill Holmgren, Brenda Albrecht, Michelle Humphrey, and Dr. Emily McDonald. So we'll go ahead and start with good news.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Good news. Students of the Month. Lakeville Area Schools has a Students of the Month recognition program that highlights 3 students each month. Students can be nominated by anyone in the Lakeville Area Schools community: students, staff, families, and community members. We're excited to announce that November's students are Julian Doherty from Small Wonders Preschool, Aubrey Clements, 4th grade at Lakeview Elementary School, and Kyra Brockman, 8th grade, Century Middle School. Way to go and congratulations. There you go. You can cheer. That's definitely allowed. Staff of the Month. Lakeville Area Schools is excited to have a monthly recognition program that highlights staff members as well, nominated by anyone in the Lakeville Area Schools community. We're excited to announce that November's staff are Suleika Omar. She's a district-wide school success liaison, and Sopal Auk, who is chief custodian at Orchard Lake Elementary School. So thank you for all you do as staff of the month for us here in Lakeville. Let's go. 2024 Ed Minnesota Lakeville Educators of Excellence. Congratulations to Christina Huddleston Elementary first grade teacher Allison Thone, and Lakeville South High School science teacher John Gilmer. They are being announced as this year's Education Minnesota Lakeville Educators of Excellence. Allison and John are now eligible candidates for the 2025 Minnesota Teacher of the Year Award among candidates from across the state who were nominated by their colleagues and named by Education Minnesota. We are very proud to have outstanding educators like John and Allison serving our students. We all should understand and know that their dedication and commitment to their students sets a standard of excellence that inspires all of us. The Minnesota Teacher of the Year will be announced this spring. Let's give a loud, proud for those two. Another big one, Lakeville South Cougars net the 4A State Volleyball Championship title. The Lakeville South High School girls volleyball team claimed the 2024 Class 4A State Championship title after an exciting final match against the Champlin Park Rebels on Saturday, November 9th at the Xcel Energy Center. The Cougars pulled off a 3-2 victory, showcasing their skill, resilience, and teamwork. So hearty congratulations to our girls from Lakeville South Cougars on an outstanding season and their championship title. Yay, go Cougars. National Signing Day. We had students, athletes at Lakeville North and South have signed letters of intent to continue their academic and athletic careers in colleges. 10 Lakeville North students and 13 Lakeville South students were offered either collegiate athletic scholarships, preferred walk-on status, or the opportunity to continue to play at a Division I or Division II level school. They signed their letters of intent at the National Signing Day ceremonies held at their high schools on Wednesday, November 13th. And you can see a full list of names on our district website at isd194.org/news. So congratulations to all those student athletes. And then Blazing Cats. Blazing Cats soccer took second place at state. They had a strong finish for their season. And this was in the 2024 Adapted Soccer Tournament. The Blazing Cats made it to the state championship game on November 16th and came in second against Dakota United Hawks. The team includes student athletes from Lakeville area schools, Farmington, and Burnsville. Congratulations to our amazing Blazing Cats on an outstanding season. And Madam Chair, that concludes good news.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate hearing all of that. So for board communications tonight, we're going to shake things up just a little bit. I have a special guest that I've invited, Callan Barker. You want to come up front here? I met Callan at Panaprog this year during the Young Entrepreneurs section that was hosted by the Property Geeks. Had a great conversation with him, and he kind of shared some of the learning that he's had. So I invited him to come to the board and share what he's learned and what he's doing. I think it's pretty awesome. So Callan, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Callan Barker, an 8th grader at Century Middle School. I thank Ms. Baker for inviting me and the rest of the school board for allowing me to present my experience in 3D printing. I was first introduced to it during wind time, which is it's just a session that allows us to catch up on any work that we might have or just have a fun time in the morning. I decided to try it out, and after that, I was hooked on it. I just didn't want to stop. And my parents started to notice. So eventually, by my 6th grade year, at the end, I received my first printer, a Solvil SV06 Plus. It was an amazing printer to start off with. Not super expensive, but not super cheap. I eventually learned how to upgrade my components on it and just took off building my own designs. I started creating fidgets and keychains for my friends at school, which turned into small commission items like custom keychains for other schools. At some point during my 7th grade year, I really wanted to upgrade to a faster printer that allowed me to print multiple colors at once. So I now have a Bamboo Labs PONS, which has allowed me to print multiple colors in half the time for everything, for half the time that I've printed.
So awesome.
After printing a ton of stuff for fun, I realized that I needed to get some of the money back. So I signed up to be a part of the Entrepreneurs Alley hosted by Property Geeks during Panaprog this last summer to sell some of my creations. I came up with a business name and business cards and did really well selling my items. That's where I met Miss Baker and sold a ton of fidgets and dragons. I now have my own Facebook page selling items I have in stock or the custom orders that have been requested. So tonight I have brought some gifts for all of you. You can choose either a Lakeville North or a Lakeville South keychain of your preference to take home with you tonight.
Oh, cool.
Do you have any questions?
First of all, I was just totally impressed with the learning that that you had shared with me. I love how you were introduced to an idea and you took it and you completely made it your own and made your own business, and you just continue to grow this. I mean, this is like the dream that we have for all of our students at Lakeville schools, is be able to introduce them to something and you just take the learning and take off on your own. So thank you for coming and sharing that. And I'm sure other board members, if you have questions, I won't not dominate the time here. Anybody else have anything to?
I got a quick.
Yeah.
I got a quick question.
This is so cool.
Keep hitting that button. I guess I better because
Did you get it?
there it
There we
goes.
go. Okay.
I know they need it to record on the thing there. So what is this?
So I have my phone on me actually.
Okay, I got mine. Let me just wait.
You can
Explanation,
It's a
demonstration,
it's a
practical
phone
application.
holder, iPad. You can put your iPad or
Yeah.
a Kindle works perfectly on that, or even a book,
cool.
like a regular book.
Excellent. So, and it has different sizes.
Yeah.
So are you marketing these? Are you like selling these?
Yeah. No, not right now. But I mean, if you
Do we
would
need
like to
12,000 of
purchase
them?
one of the examples, that'd be amazing. But not. It was not a planned.
I'm loving the fidgets too. This is something that a lot of kids need and use, and these are really awesome. You said you have like a website and a Facebook page, right?
I do have a Facebook page. I do not have a website yet.
Okay.
So
I-
I have a, oh, go ahead.
I have some business cards.
Oh, cool. I can fidget with those for a while.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There you go, that's a good one.
Perfect.
So I just have a question.
Yeah.
You said you kind of started this with the wind time at Century, and then you kind of expanded this on your own. Have you had any more involvement with teacher? I just want to also acknowledge any teachers that have supported you. Or?
So actually, I did it again in my 7th grade year as a club that was offered for fall and winter sports. So when I did that year, that one, or this past club, I guess, I was given more of like the leader, I guess, to where Miss Anderson, the librarian at Century Middle School, she's the sponsor for the club. She basically handed me over the reins to that club.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for coming. And can you
Yeah.
come through so we can shake your hand too? So.
Preference red, white, red, black.
I'm going to have to ask for one of each. Can
He
I?
can't divide.
I can't. Even at the state championship, I had to say I wanted Lakeville to win.
Red,
So-
white,
Or red and black.
red, black, or
You
red,
choose,
or-
sir. Whatever you choose, I will accept. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. Lakeville South. Thank you.
I had a son in both schools, so I need two. Thank you. How much are we for this? Just 10. Thank you.
I was going to buy that.
I already did, I
You
stole
beat
it.
me to it.
You've got the card, so
Yeah, I'll
you're
go
set.
online and-
You're set. All right. Thank you. All right. Do any board members have any information they'd like to share from committees they've attended, or if they've had any of those meetings this week or this month? Special Advisory Council meet? Yes? No?
Yes.
Okay.
See if anybody else.
Okay. Director Thompson?
Yeah, I don't have a comment from a stakeholder, but I did get feedback from a stakeholder who was trying to do public comment today. There isn't anything on the website that says you have to register for public comment ahead of time, and so he did show up today at 5:45, trying to get in. And so, if we can make some corrections on that, that would be ideal. And then also, that is what I see on the website. Oh, I'm on the website right now. It doesn't say where you're supposed to register, but I could be mistaken.
Kim does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. All right, Director Keller, did you have something from Special
We
Ed?
did have special ed advisory, and we went through some updates just on the current status of programs and the student counts that we have in those programs, and where we have some staffing challenges. What else did we cover, Michelle? Was that it? I think it was just kind of, it was the first time this year that this group was meeting, and it was just going around doing introductions
Okay.
and kind of giving everybody a lay of the land for where we're at and some of the challenges they're going to be facing.
Okay. Director Anderson, did you have something from 917?
No, something next one.
Okay.
I can share. I've been to two, I went to the Gifted Advisory Council. That was there were some new members, and so part of it was introduction, and part of it was just thinking about, or some of the different topic areas, and kind of how to best support gifted students. And we read a couple different articles that were helpful, so that was good. And then I was also at the District Shared Leadership meeting. And I thought it was really nice. We were all in different groups and kind of talking about just different visions people have for the district in terms of how they can start, I would guess, kind of advocating for development, staff development, and how they can kind of I don't know if I'm capturing everything, Dr. McDonald, but it was a lovely meeting where I think we evaluated some of the test score data and lots of discussion around themes for that too and what might be changing. And so it was, I thought, very good discussion.
Okay. Any other updates? Okay. So hearing none, we'll move on. If we could have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
So we have a motion by Director Lind. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director David Anderson. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. I'll ask for a vote. All in favor to approve the agenda tonight, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, are there any items that board members would like to remove from the consent agenda for further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
All motion.
I have a motion by Director Carly Anderson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director David Anderson. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Director Thompson?
Yeah, I saw on the consent agenda there was a role for a data analyst or analytics person for about, and so just curious what that role was and what that role would be doing.
We had a vacancy with that particular position, and it's taken us a while to fill it. That's what I can tell you about it. It's not a new position.
Okay.
Okay.
And what exactly is that role? Just out of curiosity. I saw data.
They are I guess my best way of articulating it is they are our data guru for academic data.
Okay.
I know guru's not an official.
Yeah.
I know guru's not an official term, but I'll say subject matter expert.
Before I was on the board, I know I had some questions about things, and when I had some questions, I was sent to that person to get more information about. So it is someone who's fielding those kinds of questions, not from just district leadership, but also from community members, I imagine, right? Is this Andrew Barron?
Director Thompson?
Yeah.
And does this role also have in the scope of their responsibilities for enrollment, projections, and a bunch of other things? So this is our data analytics SME.
No, that's different. That gentleman sitting right over there is
Okay.
the guy who, and I'll introduce him a little later, but for what you're just asking about is Mr. Nino.
Okay. And this role is specifically about data analytics for the academics of our 12,000 students.
Yes,
For-
focused in that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, so for reports tonight, we'll move on to the enrollment update, and that is Mr. Douglas Nino.
Chair Baker, Directors, Board of Education. This evening, we're going to provide a report that is prepared doing several different things, and I'll dive into that. But before we get into that, I want to introduce Douglas Eno, who's somebody you probably have not seen or may not be aware of. Well, Douglas has been in the district handling, he is currently an information systems supervisor, works with our district IT department, and he's been here 20 years. And my first introduction to Douglas was about 2006-ish. He worked for Lakeville Schools. I was in St. Paul Schools. We were at a campus user group meeting. Do you remember that? Yeah, so long time. And I credit Douglas with being a mentor to me. I had been transitioning into public education and was a student information system manager for St. Paul schools. That's where I started in public education. And I didn't know a whole lot, but he did and still does. And he was a good coach, teach, and mentor that I could reach out to. So I just want to establish a little bit of that. Douglas has been doing enrollment. He's instrumental in transportation information, any kind of student information that we would possibly need. He is in the vernacular. He is a subject matter expert and probably the most knowledgeable individual I think we have within our school system. So I have asked Douglas, who has not in the past done these kinds of things, to share with you about enrollment and enrollment projections. And I don't know, somebody coach me here. Do I just okay? Nope. That way. Okay, perfect. I'm not sure where's the computer that this is actually activating. Okay, so I got to go like this. So Matt or Brett, if I zap you, I apologize. Will, if I get you, I didn't mean to. What we want to do tonight is give you a long-range look, and by long range, 60 months. What are we looking like as a organization? So we want to provide you that overview, and we want to look at what the trends are telling us over a 60-month period. I have method to my madness. Is that Shakespeare, I think? Maybe. But I do have method to my madness, and the method is I want to talk macro, where we are today. I've been back on the job, so to speak, for about 2 months now, and I've been spending a lot of time in this area and on the budget and trying to look a little deep with that. As the current board retires and a new board comes on, I think it's a good break point to say, here's a benchmark that we can maybe continue conversations. You deserve, and our community deserves, a far deeper dive, and I like to go macro to micro as I try to set conditions for conversations and information to the board, so that as we do refinement process here, that we do as partners, administration with the board, that we can understand kind of a baseline where we start at. And I also think it's important to look 60 months out. Now, it's really difficult in public education because we get funded through legislation. The legislation cycle defines a lot of what our business and staffing cycles are. And so we want to be in that rhythm. And to be in that rhythm, we know that what we say today, 5 years from now, there's a lot of refinement and adjustment that has to happen. But if you're working off of that baseline, I think you're going to be far more effective at being able to understand where the adjustments are, and more importantly, why those adjustments are necessary. And then you have the ability and the information, I think, to help us shape and define that, and for our community to understand that. So that's our purpose. And why is enrollment where I start? Enrollment is very defining for any school system. So here's some really good news that Lakeville ought to be very proud about. As a school system, we have been growing. And growth is where any, I think, community would prefer to be, as opposed to shrinking. Shrinking is, as I like to say, no bueno, usually, for most school districts. It defines our revenue through a very intricate process, but the basic knowledge starts with enrollment. How many kids are we getting? You can get into weighted pupil units, and you can get into MARS reporting, and we'll get into all that. But it defines our budget. It tells us what our staffing is going to be, because our students define what that is. We have class sizes and all those different parameters that we work with that give us that definition and help us with staffing and making decisions around staffing. Program delivery, and what programs can we offer, and what is the priority because we will not have all the resources to do everything. So priorities have to be established, and what programs are we going to nurture and what programs do we maybe have to sunset. And then facility planning and maintenance, which is an ongoing thing. If you're a growing district, we opened Highview Elementary most recently. There's been a lot of conversation as I have returned to the district and learned there's a lot of conversation around middle school. And what do we look like with regard to our growth pattern in Lakeville. So as we start the conversation, and I'm going to hand this off to Douglas here. What I want to do is make sure that everybody understands the guidance I've provided to staff, and this is really it. I've directed the staff to use cohort survival method historical data, and the reason I've done that is historically in Lakeville area schools, and I know Judy and Terry probably know this, and remember Hazel and our Hazel demographic studies, right? And we were on a cyclic process with that. You also may remember Mr. Sheehan and MinPro. So MinPro does cohort survival methodology and historical data. There's birth rates, there's growth rates, and I do want to say that we haven't used Hazel. I think Hazel retired. And we did commission TeamWorks. I've read a report from TeamWorks, I think from 2023, a very comprehensive and really good report, a demographic study report. And we got an update about 2 weeks ago, I think it was. Does that sound about right? Okay. That I looked at as well. But they did a great job with their charge, and I think their charge had to do with looking at housing starts and making some predictive analysis with regard to that. What I do know, and I'm, again, bringing back my time in this district from 2013 until 2022 and then now again, and I know what Douglas has produced for us has been accurate to within 1% year over year for over 20 years. And so I said, we're going with that method, and because it's absolutely proven reliability. So I want to just say that out loud, that was my staff guidance. We did do a check-in with MinPro, who also does cohort survival method and historical data, always because you should essentially proof, like I call it a sanity check, to make sure that what we're coming out with, somebody else independently can back that up. So that's kind of where we start. We're looking at 5 years, so 60 months. And this does not depict the TeamWorks model or that data, and it's nothing against TeamWorks at all. It's I wanted to do cohort survival, and I made that call. So if the board disagrees with that or has issue with that, please, it's my fault. It's what I directed. So I just want to set that condition as we go, and we can certainly modify and adjust. But this is where I think we should benchmark. So I'm going to hand this lightsaber over to Douglas here, and he'll walk you through what the numbers are saying, and then we'll kind of go from there. Sir, it's all yours.
Thank you, Superintendent Baumann, and thank you, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to present this information to you. I also want to, if you'll grant me the grace, to take a little bit of extra time to extend special thanks to Director Kelleher and Director Lynn for your many years of dedicated and supportive service to the district. I believe, Director Kelleher, you were on the board when I started here already, and Director Lynn was principal of Lakeview Elementary at the time and later became a board member. You may, in passing, hear me call Director Lind Chief. That is an appropriate form of address for a Chief Master Sergeant of the United States Air Force, which Director Lind retired from the Minnesota Air National Guard, where I had the privilege of serving with him for a few years. Thank you for your service, and thank you to all the board members for your service and support. It's critical to educating our youth, which is what we're here to do. So you'll see a quote on the bottom of this slide. It says, all models are wrong, but some are useful, okay? And so that ties into what Director Baumann was talking about with which model do we choose, and he chose the cohort model, which we've used for years. It has been accurate to, as he said, within plus or minus 1% in the time that we have used it. The caveat to that being another slogan, which is past performance is no guarantee of future success. You've probably heard that in financial circles. Well, that's in statistical circles as well. None of this I created. All of this is stuff that I have just built upon that was already built by previous tech directors and business directors and our former data analytics director, Andrew Barron. And as much as we would love to just tally up the cost of providing a quality education to our students and hand that to the state where the majority of our funding comes from and say, this is it, give us the money for what that costs, that's just not the way it works. The state says, no, give us the number of students you served, what kinds of students you serve, under what statuses, and we will provide you funding based on that. So in order for us to plan for the future, we have to plan off of the numbers, hence the chart that we have before us this evening, the charts, plural. So this first one is just a line chart that shows where we've been, where we are, and where we think we're going. And so you can see that we did not go as high as we were predicting last year. We are roughly level with last year. That is primarily tied to economic conditions. The growth in this district is highly dependent on new housing. And when new housing slows, so does our enrollment growth. And that's what we're seeing here. And so the models are not quite as optimistic as you may have seen previously because we're under different economic conditions than we were previously. Previously, we were seeing lots more new permits being issued, lots more housing being sold. The next chart is basically the same chart. It's just in a bar graph form. And so you'll see the same numbers listed there. You'll see a summary there that our total student enrollment projected to grow by about 558 students, or about 5%. Again, that's reading the tea leaves, that's a prediction. We'd like it to go higher than that, but not too much because we don't want to be overzealous in our predictions. And so we try to balance that to make sure we're planning correctly. The next chart breaks those numbers down by elementary, middle, and high school levels. I added into that chart the maximum total capacity of our brick and mortar schools. So for the elementary, our 9 elementary buildings combined would produce a maximum capacity. Now that's not considering programming like special ed and whatever, it's just how many people can you fit into that building? How many students can we just cram into that building? That'd be 6,779 students. You can see that we're not even projected to be close to that anytime soon, okay? You'll see in the middle school that we're a little bit closer. And what that chart does not reveal, that we'll be getting into as Superintendent Baumann mentioned before, we'll be digging into those details and getting into those details at a later time, but our Century Middle School is a lot tighter than this chart reflects, and we will need to pay attention to that as we get into those future discussions. And then the high school, you'll see the maximum capacity there, and that we're not as close to that, keeping in mind that as the middle school passes on to the high school, those numbers are going to continue to grow. Looking at the housing market, I threw a line onto this chart. We've got the permits chart on the left and the sale closings on the right, with the enrollment numbers imposed over that. So you can see there's not a direct correlation. There is a rough correlation. Backing up what I was saying earlier about our growth is really tied to that growth in housing, construction, and sales. We do also have, from 22 on, our quarter counts. So you can see that, we have fewer permits later, because we're still in the fourth quarter. They haven't produced those numbers yet, so we don't have that for this year. But you can see in the different colors there how that breaks down by quarter.
Hey, Douglas, can I ask?
Yes.
So this is just Lakeville?
This is just Lakeville.
Because you're not able to get the Elko New Market and,
I did not put together the Elko New Market. It was a lot easier to get the Lakeville numbers than it was to get the Elko New
I
Market numbers.
just want to make sure that this is just part of the
Yep.
district. that- yeah.
Superintendent Baumann has talked to both
Yep.
city directors about that. I don't know if you want to address that at this point.
Yeah, I'm trying to get with Tom Terry down in Elko New Market to see if we can get the same or similar reports that we get from Justin. So we're working on that. I am, by the way, going down to Elko New Market City Council to give them an update on state of the schools.
Yep.
I want to say on December 5th. So I am very engaged with them, and I would love to have been able to show both. We're working on it.
Oh, I know you are. I just wanted to make sure that we know we represent more than just the city of Lakeville.
Absolutely. All right. Another thing to note on the home permit side, if you look at the 2010 and 11, the reason I included that was that was the last new housing downturn that we had. And one of the trends that we saw there was that the enrollment continued to grow even though the housing had slowed or even ceased to a certain degree. We're seeing the same thing here. If you look at the other end of the chart into the 2024, it still looks like we're growing. Well, that's because we lag those sales and those buildings. So now we're seeing this year with the 12,000, with the leveling into 25, that we're starting to see the impact of that. We're hoping the economy turns around and that we'll start seeing that go back up again. And that is what our models are projecting off of. Not that we continue to go down, but that we actually do go up. In summary, we continue to see areas of concentrated growth in our community, primarily the new development areas, which has included at times the Elko New Market area when they've had kind of areas up for development. They just don't come up as frequently as the Lakeville area does. Enrollment growth primarily driven by new single-family home sales. That's repeating myself there, but housing development sales slowed due to inflation. Enrollment is projected to increase by about 5% in the next 5 years. And the next facility space pressure point, as I alluded to earlier, will be at the middle schools, primarily Century Middle School. Any further questions?
I have a question. So I'm just thinking about kind of that chart where you showed the elementary, middle, and high school. And so I think we've been talking about this kind of cohort of kids going through elementary right now, and the push is going to be when they get to middle school, and then, like you're saying, it's going to impact high school when they get to high school, right?
Yes.
And so one of the questions I have, I guess, is how do we think about this as like potentially a wave of students going through our district versus what's coming behind them? And do we really need, do you know what I'm saying? Is it we just have a wave of students coming, or we really do need to think about a new middle because we're going to need that for the
Absolutely.
coming years?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, and this is, as I shared earlier, as I came into the school system, back into the school system, there was a lot of conversation around, well, we'll just say the rumor mill was we're building a new middle school. I'm like, oh, okay. And I want to look at that, and that's why I'm starting here and saying, we're flat. We lag on the economy, on what the economy does, but we have to be monitoring it literally on a quarterly basis. Housing starts, what are we doing with closing? For the reason that you articulate right there, Dr. Anderson, it's really important that we see it and we plan for it, because if you're doing an addition, you need 24 months plus any kind of funding that you would need to do. You won't have to do land acquisition. So you have to backwards plan all that. If you're going to build another school, that's a bigger piece of pizza to eat. And there are other options like lease levy if you're doing additions where you don't have to go to the community. There's all kinds of different options. And I really want to zero in on what exactly is it that our need is. And how are we going to fund that and have that conversation internally with the staff and the leaders in our buildings and with the Board of Education and ergo the entire public, so that we're clear on what that is. So we're going to drill down to, and we already have the preliminary look, but again, macro to micro. So the micros start to become grade levels, right? So we can see that wave, and by school, so that all of this fits hand in glove. And that's the goal. And in my mind, that's a February timeframe that we need to be coming back and sharing that level of detail. Again, we're kind of in a board transition, just candidly, and we want to set a condition as the new board comes on to lay that out in my words, painful detail, but see, I dig that stuff, so it's not painful to me, but it is to some other people, because sometimes it's watching paint dry, but it is important.
Dr.
I'm
Lind?
trying to do my best to answer that question without just saying, this is the answer, because we really don't quite know the answer. I got a good idea about what it is from these macros.
Director Lind?
I think we're actually in pretty good shape. That's what I think. We have a concentration problem or a distribution problem. I don't think we have a too many kids problem yet.
So I'm going to go Director Lind and then Director Kelleher.
Doug, or should I say First Sergeant?
You may.
Good.
Or shirt for short.
For sure. My question is, on one of the slides, it shows the next 5 years that the elementary student population will be decreasing by 1%. Is there any, can you guess why that's happening? Is it the homes are too expensive, younger families can't afford, or what is it?
I could speculate. I don't have hard data on that.
I know.
One of the differences between the cohort model that we use and what, say, Teamwork and MPro have used is the kindergarten projections. So Teamworks and I use the same model of, we use past numbers to predict future numbers, whereas the MPro uses a different formula. I haven't dug into exactly what that uses. So that really, the elementary numbers really tie into where we come in on the kindergarten. Thus far, we have been fortunate that the models have been fairly well predictive. That's no guarantee. We could see a few more, we could see a few less. And that's where predictions really start to fall apart, is when we get into the granularity of kindergarten or this particular school or that particular school. And that's where Teamworks really specializes in getting into that granularity. We're looking at the district level for our budget predictions, and that's the numbers where we have decent accuracy and that we can rely upon. So we'd like to see more kindergartners, that's for sure. It would take a lot more time and effort to try to survey the community, see how many kindergartens we actually have out there, and with so many different options between homeschool and private school and charter schools and whatever else, it's hard to say how much that will actually capture.
Yeah, kindergarten is always a wild card.
Yes.
There's just too many variables, including daycare. They want to go to school here for that reason. There's a
Yes.
lot of things going on. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, I've talked about this before. The city of Lakeville is, 36 square miles, and our district is like 86 or 87 square miles. So we are still continuing to grow, maybe not growing as fast, but there's a short-term plan for that next middle school or possibly elementary, whatever that might look like. But there's also the long-term planning for where growth will continue to come to this land. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, when we look at the entire 86 square miles of our school district, we're maybe about a third developed right now, right?
good
So we've
estimate,
got
yes.
2/3 of the district to develop at some point long-term. So the planning may be looking at the next 5 years or the next 10 years. And keep in mind, it takes 3 to 4 years to build a school and to plan it. And so when you're looking at enrollment numbers, you really got to look like 4 years out here to see what that looks like. So I just think that it's going to be really important to keep the long-term plan in place for where this district's going to go with being 2/3 developed. Before I got on the board 20-some years ago, we were predicted at some point, just because of our land mass and the ability to grow, to be, I think it was the 4th or 5th largest district in the state. So, you know, I guess I'm just saying that we are going to be looking at 5-year enrollment projections and trying to plan for that. But there's also a longer plan because, like Interim Superintendent Baumann mentioned, is there's lots of options to consider, and some are maybe better suited for short-term solutions versus the long-term solution. And those long-term solutions are probably more cost-effective in the long term. So I think there's a lot to be considering and weighing here when you're looking at these factors.
One of the advantages that we've had, though we don't always see it that way, is, say, over our mirror district on the north side, Elk River, where they exploded from 10,000 up to 13,000 within a couple, 3 years.
Yep.
That is much more difficult to manage than what we've had. We've been able to gradually look into and do that kind of long-term planning you're exactly talking about.
Yeah, well, when I first got on the board, we were building a school every other year because we were gaining 700 students a year, which is a school. So there was some huge challenges with that.
Indeed.
So.
Yeah, the other thing I'll just say is everything you said is exactly correct. That's why we have to be in an iterative cycle.
Yep.
And when leadership changes, at least within administration, that iterative stuff has to stay alive. So that's an important aspect too.
So one of the things that I've been concerned about is our early childhood numbers and how we're at capacity on what we can provide for services within our early childhood center. Given that we share close boundaries with other cities, you know, when I think about those incoming kindergarten numbers, how many of our kindergarten students are leaving us during early childhood and not coming back because then they're already, you know, in that district because they have the capacity to serve that need. Do you happen to have or is it something that you would look into to see what percentage of our preschool population that we're actually able to serve within our district?
So one of the challenges with the community ed is they don't have to serve students of this district only. They get the opportunity to serve whatever students come from whatever district that they may be in. And so we would have to track that a lot more carefully. So if that is something that the board as a whole believes is worth the time and investment in doing, we can certainly look into that or see if that's something that TeamWorks would be able to look into for us.
Well, I think it's a concern. As I was looking at District 196, they're actually doing some studies right now looking at changing some of their district boundaries for their elementary schools so that they can accommodate more of that early childhood population, and they're very close to us. So considering that we're full and we can't serve anybody else, and they're making some changes so that they can serve more, I worry about what that does to our enrollment in those classes.
The long-term theory has been and continues to be that if we're the ones serving them, they tend to like to be with us and stay. So there's definitely validity to that. The challenge that we've had is where the growth is for the early childhood is also where the growth is for our elementary students. And to be able to do the kind of model that your Rosemonts, 196s and whatnot are doing, you have to have space available for them to do that.
Right. You're correct. Director Thompson?
Just a couple questions. Director Anderson, I think you are right, because while we see these metrics, we're seeing them at the macro view, but we don't know if there's an uptick in 4th and 5th grade that are coming up that would really skew what we might be looking at. So looking at the middle school, I do see that with 2,700 kids, obviously the 3,200 capacity, we're at about 82%, and I think at our last boundary meetings, we've been told we want to be 90% is tight, and so that doesn't give us a lot of room I would assume at the middle school level. And first of all, welcome back. I didn't know you existed, so this is fantastic. That's great. But with that being said, with the different data elements, does that mean that we may want to recalibrate or refine the boundaries that we've put in place? And obviously, that's going to be a separate conversation, but there might be avenues for consideration.
The answer to the question is everything's on the table. If you have a concentration problem versus a distribution problem, you have to consider that or look at that, or I'll use a term that's internal staff term. We call it a fruit salad, have been stopgap measures to deal with boundaries as they are constructed. So obviously the district went through a major boundary shift, and we probably have to look at that methodology again. I can tell you right now, I already know with Highview, that's an issue. But the detail that both you and Director Anderson are asking, we will bring that forward, and we do want to partner with your thinking and ideas around any of that, because typically those kinds of things are what I call significant emotional events that are often referred to as political hot potatoes. But we have to be in a change management process, and we have to be in a high communication process so that people understand what's going on, and we need to answer the question, why?
Director Thompson?
And my last question is that I think when we approved the fiscal 24 budget, we were projecting 12,200 students, and that's a 175 student shy, times that by 10 grand, like that's a $1.7 million expected reduction in our revenues. So we should be talking about that next.
We will be. We recognize that. We also know we have to do an adjustment, and we'll start with the macro, and we'll talk about that, but right on, sir.
So one last question, sorry. So when I was doing my training for administration, I met with like a finance director, and one of the things that she kind of drilled into me when I interviewed her was that a district has to know where their students are going and why. So are you going to include on some of this enrollment data students that are enrolling out of the district, and are we going to look into why that's occurring?
Intra, open, all that has to be discussed.
Right.
We as a staff owe you recommendations with regard to that. But that's the long answer for Roger, yes.
Thanks.
On the numbers front, we have looked preliminarily at those numbers. This is going off of probably 4 weeks ago that we were looking at this, anticipating that this was coming. And we are still taking in more than we are sending out.
Okay.
When it comes to open enrollment. The one that we're scrambling with some of the staff changeovers between student services and information services is the non-public private homeschool numbers. Those are still being entered into the system so that we can provide those numbers as well. In regards to the fruit salad and the numbers that you pointed out, one of the reasons that we decided to go with the cohort model was because of our internal numbers being slightly less than the 12,200, but not significantly less. It was about 80 students less on our internal numbers. That was one of the reasons we considered returning to the cohort model. The fruit salad is the preliminary area model that was instituted when Dr. Snyder was the superintendent of the schools. She had brought that over from her previous district in Wisconsin, and it allows us to adjust the boundaries for new areas as long as we are not moving any students. And that way we were able to manage for over a decade not moving any students, which was remarkable for this district where we have been moving students every 2 to 3 years prior to that. So it brought a lot of stability, which also made the pain a lot higher when we had to go and make that adjustment.
Director Thompson?
So just to clarify, in that situation, if, let's say, I'm just thinking proximity of Eastview and Highview, and Eastview not being remotely close to capacity at this point. And so let's say a new neighborhood emerges as you look across the street from Highview, that neighborhood would go to Eastview. That's what you're saying? You adopt that kind of
That's the
strategy?
concept. I'm not
Okay.
saying that that's what we would do at this point, but that is the concept, yes.
Director Thompson?
And with Eastview not at capacity or even Highview, I believe that with the boundary changes, we put a lockdown on open enrollment or intra-district for the next year. And so hoping that maybe those are things that we can re-discuss on other options.
Yeah, I just, let's be careful about the terminology lockdown or close, because we don't do that. In fact, I think statutorily we're prohibited from doing that. So what we have to do is evaluate each one. Now, where you get, and I would just say Century is a classic case, maybe even Highview, but Century I know for sure. What we do intake those intra-district requests, but we may not be able to fulfill them in the current situation. But what I've told the staff is we want to be able to set conditions to fulfill those. But that's driven by where our boundaries are, how many students we have, what that concentration issue is, whether we can get to adjustments as Dr. Anderson talked about. And all those things have to come together. I do like the stability model a lot, but as Douglas pointed out, when you do have to do boundary changes, and typically, I mean, for this school district, it was predicated on we had to open another elementary school. And as much as we would think that that would be easily understood, it's still very difficult to assimilate, especially if you're a family that's grossly affected by that. And we totally empathize and trying to be as stable as we can be. I think that's what we owe our families and our students, because in an education model, the more stability that you can introduce into it, the better it is for our students. I think that's what the research proves. So I think that's a good philosophical position to adopt.
So let me gain some clarity, because I think I'm confused here, because I think during the boundary changes, the board made a decision that parents were not allowed to intra-district their kid to another school building this year for the entire school year. And so is that still intact, or am I hearing that people can make requests? I don't know what the answer is.
So there were exceptions to that. Those exceptions are posted on the website.
Okay.
And there were people who still applied. And as Superintendent Baumann said, we considered those in terms of priority and space available. So when there were special needs, I don't remember off the top of my head what the priorities were. One of them being if you're a staff member of the building, being a consideration if you want your student to also be in that building, transportation and whatnot. So those were things that we did take into consideration, but it was far more limited than we usually are.
Yep.
Going forward, that is a point of decision that we need to come to of whether we're going to open that back up in this coming school year.
Yeah, and just for a point of clarification, when you're saying open enrollment by statute, that's something we do have to abide by. So when you're talking within our school district, it's intra-enrollment. And so I think just for sake of understanding, we have to make sure you're using the right terminology when having this conversation.
It's good to highlight the distinction between intra-district requests and open enrollment. Open
Yep.
enrollment being between districts,
Yep.
intra being within our district.
Yep.
The open enrollment, you're absolutely right, is statutorily dictated as to
And the other
what we
falls
need to do
under
and
our
whatever.
parameters.
So we never say applications are closed. We always accept applications for open enrollment.
Yep.
And then we consider what space we have available. And we can say, well, space is not available in your chosen school, but we do have space available in this school if you would like.
And then intra is open to our parameters.
Okay.
We'll put that on the agenda topic, request. So.
I don't think we have any more questions. Thank you so much. We appreciate
Thank
you
you.
sharing the information.
Thank you.
All right, so our next report would be the budget update from Bill Holmgren.
I'll let you have the lightsaber. So Bill and I have been working on this for, I don't know how many days, but a lot. And again, just like with enrollment. So enrollment, as we said earlier, that sets the condition for where we are. Director Thompson very astutely pointed out that, oh, well, the numbers, and I appreciate that. So we're going to talk. I wanted Bill to come here today and take a little longer range look. Now, what you're going to hear and see are based on planning assumptions. So I give the staff the guidance on what those planning assumptions need to be. And I'm not a novice to this. Did it before. So Bill and I worked out what that is, and you may agree or you may disagree with what those planning assumptions are, but I think they're pretty solid. And that's what drives our projection here. So, you know, I always say this about garbage in, garbage out. So if your planning assumptions are really bad and off, the rest of your data is going to be off. So we're trying to be really careful and wise about how we're using those planning assumptions. So, of course, we invite critical review of what we have here. But I just want you to understand that I gave him some guidance, and so if it's wrong, it's me. Okay? All right.
Madam Chair, members of the school board, Superintendent Baumann. So tonight we're going to talk about two different pieces of the budget. First of all, we are going to do a true update. Where are we at right now in this year? Even though we're only a couple months into the school year, so we don't have a lot to use to really get a perfect projection to the end of the year, but we will talk about that first. Then we are going to take some time and talk about a budget projection up to 5 years out. So let's see if I can do this right. Here we go. So what you're looking at here, these bars, of course, the red bar is the budget, and the blue bar is where we expect us to finish June 30th here this next spring. So as we talked earlier with the enrollment change, you'll see that that blue bar under state is not quite making the budget because we have less students than we had, than what we thought we had, okay? Now, at the same time, look at the local side. There we have some revenue coming in that we did not anticipate. So it's almost balancing each other out. We're going to be a little bit short when we get to the end of the year, and we'll talk about that when we bring back a revised budget to you in February for the current year. But at this point, we're projecting to be short about $500,000 overall in our revenues. So it could have been worse, of course, but we're taking into consideration for the change in enrollment, and the budget's okay. Now let's look at the expenditure side. Here we're seeing some under budget numbers. So again, your salaries, you see that we're under budget. Benefits were under budget. Purchase services, though, you're seeing a little bit of a push up that we didn't see last year. But the reason is because we are having very difficult time finding employees in our special ed areas. Okay, so we are hiring contracted services, and that's why you're seeing it here as a little bit of a bump up. And that's also why you're seeing a savings on the salary side, because we don't have those employees, but so the cost is being shifted over to purchase services. Okay, when we look at our supplies, we're under there. Actually, this ran kind of close to this last year too, where we did not spend what we thought we would in the supply area. The capital expenditures, of course, includes all of our maintenance of our buildings, and as you know, about 2/3 of the dollars we spend on maintenance comes out of our Fund 6 or building fund, which we borrow the funds for and take care of. But the other third comes out of the general fund. And we have some projects that we've had a do a little earlier this year with some maintenance items. So that's why you're seeing a little bit of a bump up there in the capital expenditure. That's not something that's going to be way over at the end of the year, because that will slow considerably. So I want to point out a couple numbers we talked about earlier back in June. You see that middle column, that's the budget we brought to you, and we predicted that we would increase the fund balance by $1.8 million. And then now we look at the variance that we see right now in our expenditure budget, you see that we have a variance to the positive there of another $1.8 million. So that's is very good news. So at this point in time, when we're looking at next June 30th, looking at the actual fund balance increasing a little over $3 million to the 11.5 million, and that pushes us up over the 5% that we need according to policy by the school board. Not way huge, but it is 5.4%. So it's very good news from where we were just a couple years ago. Okay, any questions on any of that?
Does your forecast for the remainder of this year anticipate filling those remaining FTE roles that we have vacant currently, or is it leveraging teachers for the rest of the? Because we don't know.
The assumption at this point is that the purchase services that we've already hired will stay in those positions for the rest of this year. When we bring the revised budget to you, you'll see that shift where some of the expenditures will be pushed over to purchase services and will be taken out of the salary area.
All right.
Okay?
Director David Anderson.
So how many open special ed positions do we still have?
Oh, I couldn't tell you that. Do you
On the
know,
thing, it said
Michelle?
12.
That's about accurate. We're updating the website, all of our job postings.
Okay.
I'm getting new contracts on a regular
All right.
basis for purchase services to bring people in so we have people here. I got another one today, so it's
Director
good news.
Thompson and then Director
Thank
Lind.
you.
Is it an even cost when we use substitute teachers when we bring FTEs, or is it more expensive? Just curious. I don't know.
It's relatively flat.
Okay.
You'll see, of course, when you see those contracts come through, you'll see the rates higher than we pay, but we're not paying any benefits. So it's pretty much a wash.
It was
We
wash.
don't have any area where we're way overpaying for a service.
But you also have the stability, I think, right, if you contract compared to having a different sub every few days?
Well, you can't just put a sub in a position unless you post for like a long-term sub, and then, like if a short-term sub can only sub for 20 days in that role, so
Yeah.
there's that too. Director Lind?
I guess great minds think alike. Had the same question Brian had. It was answered. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I just want to dig a little deeper. You can take, when we talk about our budget, really how good are we doing? How's it look? So this is actually looking at the last 3 years, okay? So the first bar, of course, is 2 years ago. The red bar is last year, and so forth. So again, you're seeing that same savings in the salaries as we just talked about. So we're spending less to date. These numbers are as of October 31st. So we've spent 18.8% of our salary budget, where last year we had spent 19.5 at the same time period. And by doing this, it really normalizes the expenditures so you can see a true picture and truly be able to compare one year against the other. So again, you'll see in the benefit area, we're spending more to date than we did the prior 2 years. And again, you're seeing the purchase services where we're paying a little bit more, but it really isn't that far off from we were 2 years ago. Our supplies and materials, most of this is allocated to the buildings. They spend those dollars where they see fit. We don't have any buildings that are coming to us going over budget. They do a very good job managing their budgets. So what you're seeing here is just the way they spend. Sometimes they'll spend a little more earlier and a little bit less. Sometimes they'll save something for something they're going to do in the spring and so forth. So that's why you're seeing some variances here. And of course, capital expenditures are, again, the maintenance items in our buildings, mainly LTFM funds is why you're seeing a little bit more spent to date than we have in previous years. And our other expenditures mainly is our insurance. And I mean, not any of our health insurance, but just our liability insurance. And it's also our work comp insurance. And this is a place where we're seeing some savings. Our matter of fact, it was pretty high. We had a lot of injuries a few years back, and those numbers are coming down. We're spending a lot less dollars on that type of insurance. So this is very good news for a budget, not only now, but going forward. That was by objects, and now we look more on the, break it down by program area. And I just want to take a few minutes and talk about this. So why are some of these numbers maybe a little higher than we anticipated or where they're at now? The administration piece, of course, the reason that we have a little bit more expenditure there is because of the superintendent's office and the changes and the extra expenditures that have come through the district for there. Our district support is some of our expenditures that we had for the election that just came in a little earlier. We usually see a lot of those expenditures in November. That's why you're seeing that a little bit higher, is really the election. It's also, we are up on the attorney fees that we've been paying on a regular basis. We're up quite a bit, actually, on attorney fees, and that sits in this category, and that's why you're seeing that higher. When you look at our regular education, elementary and secondary, they're behaving just like the budget should. We're sitting very good. Vocational, you see that bounce around a little bit in there. That's because the actual classes that we present to our students on a yearly basis, some are eligible for vocational and some are not, and that changes from year to year. So that's why you're seeing that bounce around a little bit. Special education, again, you see less spending to date right there, and that is because we have open positions. That is exactly why that is there. You're seeing that community ed there with the zeros. This is new as of last year. Remember that there's summer unemployment that we've got to cover, and we cannot, community ed can't pay for it, and food service can't pay for it, so it runs through the general fund. And you're seeing zeros right now because we don't pay for it in October. We pay for it usually, and that bill goes out in November. So our next time we look at this, you'll see some numbers there. But that number was pretty close to the year before, so we're not going to see a big difference there. Okay, student support, if you don't know what that is really our media centers. It's all our curriculum that we buy. It's our technology department, our staff development. So again, these are pretty close to what we've done on a yearly basis, but again, we're running a little less than prior years, so that's a savings at this point. Pupil support. This is our guidance counselors. It's our security, our SRO officers, nursing, transportation. And you'll see that budget's behaving just like it should, just as in the previous years. And again, buildings and grounds, that is our little bit of an increase in maintenance this fall than we've seen in prior years. So there's no huge red flags. The budget's moving along through this year just like it should. Okay? Okay, now we're going to shift gears, and we're going to talk about a 5-year budget projection. So we're going to talk about variables that we put into our model when it comes to our levy, our state legislation, and of course our expenditures. And then of course we'll see a projection at the end. Of course, we had to take in consideration the changes that we saw in our enrollment. So these numbers have all been adjusted to what was just presented by Douglas and Superintendent Bauman. Whoop, come on, can't do it. There we go. Okay, so when we look at our school levy variables, you know that we have an inflation factor built into our operating levy. At this point, what we built into the model is a 2%. That's really what we've seen over the last few years, except for that 1 year where we did get a bump up during that really high inflation portion. But to be conservative, we're using 2% here. I think in the next year in 26, we're going to see a little bit higher than 2%, but on the most part, that's about what we run inflation across, the United States is about 2% when things are running as they should. Okay, so right now we get a little over $2,100 per pupil in our operating levy. Local optional revenue, if you remember, we talked about this when we talk about levy, but this is dollars that we're able to levy, and what it is many school districts across the state of Minnesota are not able to get operating levies passed. The state of Minnesota understands that they're underfunding schools, so they allow school districts to levy up to $724 per pupil unit to get them some help and get some more funding. So some schools use it, some don't. But in our case, where we had an operating levy, they take our operating levy and put it into the LOR. Mm-hmm. So the negative part about that is, well, we have the 724 forever, but there's no inflation factor. It's just 724 every single year. So that's when you have to see a zero there on that variable. Equity is another small piece that ties to that, especially for districts that choose not to use their LOR. Then there's an equity factor where they actually get some more funding. We get a very small amount, but we're not to the max when we look at our operating levy, so we get a small small amount there of $88 per pupil unit. Again, no increase, stayed flat. Safe schools, it's a levy portion. We get money to pay for those safe school pieces, which is really our SOR officers. But still, no change. It's going to be the same amount per pupil. The only place we get any increase in these areas is if we get more students, because these are the numbers per student. Lease levy, as you know, we have several properties that we lease for educational purposes, but there is a max on that. It's $212 per student. So, and we're at the max. We're a tiny bit over the max. So we don't have any opportunity to use any more funding in this area for any type of building.
Until 2028, just so you know, we've looked long range on that too.
Yeah, that's when some of our levies start to fall off. So and give us some space. Operating capital, that's based on a formula, but right now we're getting 221 on our levy. Our capital projects levy, as you know, those dollars are used for mainly our technology devices, a lot of STEM programming. That's a constant tax rate. This is the one area in our levy where as our net tax capacity grows, our dollars grow. This is the only place that happens. So this is great. This helps us in that area. Okay, achievement and integration. That is based on the enrollment of our minority population. So if our minority grows, then we're going to get a little more funds. About 35% of that is levy, and the rest of it comes from the state of Minnesota. So we get $560,000 right now through the levy for that program. We get another $1.1 million from the state of Minnesota, which is great news. Vocational, it's set up as whatever we spend on vocational that qualify, we get 35% of those dollars back. And the other thing I just want to point, we're assuming that the board would go and renew any levies that we have that are expiring. And as you know, we have two coming up very shortly that we've got to take care of in this next year. We have an operating levy that's generating about $1.6 million at this point, and the capital projects levy, which is generating over $4 million at this point. So there's some serious dollars there that we need to talk about when it talks about renewing levies going forward. Okay. Going to shift over to the state side. So these are the variables that we've punched into the model. We do know that in 26 we're going to get 2.5% increase in the formula allowance. After that, what we put in to be conservative is a 2% again. We don't want to put anything too high and plan any revenue that we might not get. But it could be more. The legislation for the first time this last session is they did build in kind of a sliding scale that we would get a minimum of 2%. But if the inflation was higher, we would get a higher rate with a max of 3. So, I mean, it's not a huge change, but it's better than only getting 2 forever. Our staffing, when we look at going forward, we're going to assume that we're going to have one more percent in staffing, because that's what our enrollment's doing. Okay, because as we get more and more students, we got to have staffing to support them. So that's where that 1% is coming from. As you know, pension, the state of Minnesota have us all paying more for TRA and so forth. But that difference, that increase, they're giving back to us, and that's where that $84 is coming from as kind of a reimbursement for the school district. Gifted and talented, this has been $13 per pupil unit for a long time. It doesn't generate very many dollars for that program. We actually, do more than what we get. We get about $170,000. That's all it is. Our extended time, so that's any of our targeted services, after school, summer programming. This is what we get per pupil unit. Quite a bit less than the formula allowance, but it is $5,100. Operating capital, again, on the state side, here we get at 35%. And then the LOR, there is a equalizing factor. So when we look at our LOR, we do get $7.54 from the state of Minnesota that we don't have to levy. So it's a small help when we talk about our taxpayers. And then our all teacher comp, or Q comp, that's, again, it's a split piece again. But right now we're getting $260, and 2/3 of it comes from the state of Minnesota. About 1/3 comes through our levy. So those are the factors that we put in on the revenue side in our model. And we look at the expenditure side. We look at staffing. We really look at what kind of information are we getting from the state of Minnesota on new dollars and that formula allowance? Because we really need to match that to our staffing, otherwise we're going to be out of balance when we look at our budget. So that's matched up with the state funding. Benefits are running about 3% on a yearly basis. Mainly our health insurance is driving most of that, because that's a little bit more than 3% that we actually pay out. Purchase services are running about 3% on a yearly basis of anything that we use on a regular basis. Supplies, equipment, our other piece, we have them model at 2%. And that's been running very close over the last few years. And it's actually an area we can control some. We don't have to go more than that. So when we get done, the projection I'm going to show you now is a 5-year projection, and it's what we really feel will happen. Well, we just talked about that in 2025, the end of 2025 being at 5.4, I said, with 5.36%, so it gets us back above that the board policy number, which is that red line. So you'll see over the next 3 years, we'll continue to grow that fund balance. Not huge, but it'll continue to go up. But as you know, the way that our contracts are put together or framed, lots of our employees get an automatic about 2% increase when we're stepping through the steps, and we look at that. So we're running 3.5% is really what happens on newest staffing on a regular basis. So that's why eventually we're going to fall off without any type of change in our programming. Now, this gives us time. I mean, we certainly aren't going to wait till the 5th year and all of a sudden, we got to do something. I mean, we look at that every year, try to balance that budget on a yearly basis so that we don't see that fall off when we get out 4 or 5 years. But it's really hard to give you some really hard numbers when we get those kind of years out. We don't know what legislation is going to do. We don't know what enrollment is going to do, all those things. But using the parameters what I just we talked about, this is what we're seeing in our budget over the next 5 years. So with that said, is there any questions?
Are there any questions?
Just to clarify, when you talk about 2030 and the salary steps, does that mean we're having more and more staff get to the higher end of the scale? And so that would be, like, part of this is, I know we've talked about retirement incentives and things like that. Is that, I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm wondering if those.
Well, those are all pieces that we can talk about in the near future for ways that we can try to lower our salary cost. But this is looking at our programming we have in place right today, each of our programming, the staff we have in place with the increase in staff matched to the enrollment increase. So that's what we're seeing. So yes, as people move through the salary become more and more and more. And that's why eventually the 2% from the state isn't going to be enough to keep up with our costs. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see this with any type of projection from any school district. You're going to see this curve like this when you get out a few years.
Thank you.
May I
Dr.
also
Lynn?
say that, if I could, I apologize, Chair Baker. We're doing one 5-year projection today, and we're not going to wait a year to give you a refine. So as we do the budget adjustments, we're going to be refining our long-range look at the same time. So we want to make sure we do that. The other thing I want to be, it's my intention, and I think the board could agree with this. Maybe you don't, but teacher retention to me is as important a function of our organization as you can have. Mm-hmm. And I really want to be clear that we should be doing everything that we can to retain the talent that we have and bring in more talent. I mean, that's got to be how we're approaching this. So to your point, Dr. Anderson, again, is as we move further to the right and we retain, we're going to age, and that's going to cause those increases. But we need to see those coming and share that with this board.
Director Lind?
I just have a comment regarding the 5% on the board policy at 5%. I would think that it'd be a good thing for the new board to look at that and see if they want to raise that a little bit. 5% is not a lot. If you see other districts, I think we had it was either a board meeting or a work session where we saw the fund balance of other districts and quite a bit higher. So I'm just throwing that out there for the new board.
Director Keller?
So there was a policy committee addressed that policy, and that the recommendation was 8% and taking action at 10%. You know, monitor it, and if it hits 10%, to start taking action so it doesn't fall below 8%. So that was a policy, and I believe that's in for review right now. But that came before the board in a work session to raise that.
Okay, I hadn't heard that, but now I have.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yep, that was policy.
But tonight, though, like when you met?
Well, I'm just saying, Terry said that the board should look at raising that, and we've got the policy that's being reviewed that
will be
has that.
coming to the board, like, working session?
Brian, did
'Cause I
that
don't
come to
think-
them already?
No, we discussed it, but we didn't revise that policy. Like, we discussed it, but it wasn't
Oh,
changed.
okay,
Yeah.
then, yeah, then it should, because we did talk about that. I don't know where that's sitting, Brian, I thought we had finished that to bring to the board. Yeah.
No, because I know we talked about 8% and the 10%, like, I remember that, but I don't think I don't have that it went through yet, so.
I mean, it hasn't been approved, but I
Right.
thought it came to a work session for discussion.
No, I think we discussed it, but the policy committee was still working
I'll
on it.
find out where it's at.
Thank you, I appreciate
Yep.
that.
I would encourage you to go forward with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify what that would mean, or whether we want to be more mindful of a gradual shift in that. What would that mean for, if we put a policy into place in terms of when we would expect those parameters to be met?
Well, I could say based on this, we're not at 10%. And the projection is that we're not going to get there without cuts.
Director Thompson?
Yeah, and that policy was a recommendation for the board to potentially review. So when we bring that forward, we'll share that. Now, how fast that gets implemented is a separate conversation. Obviously, there's a gradual take that we can approach it with versus, you know, a significant cut to get there. But like, you know, interim superintendent Bowman shared, we're not going to get there in the current rate that we have today with the current staff, with the current funding mechanism that we have through the state of Minnesota and property taxes. And so we will have to, as a board and as a district and as a community, think through, is having 10%, 15% in your savings account what we want? Obviously, we wouldn't be where we are today without what we had because of the situation that we went through over the past 2-3 years. But those are conversations we'll have to talk through. So.
Just one additional question. Do we know, I mean, I guess, and this would be for future conversation, but in terms of the 10%, 8% decision-making, is that based on evaluation of what peer districts are doing, or is that just what we think we feel comfortable with?
So
or-
at the last audit report, I believe the company shared that most districts around our size are about 20% of their expenditures. And so if we're sitting at about $200 million in expenditures, ideally we want to be about $40 million in savings. I think Apple Valley, Rosemont, Egan, they've got about like $70 to $60 million in savings. Now, that doesn't mean we need to get to 40 million right away or 20 right away. We'll have to think through the appropriate path and how fast we want to get there. Personally, I'd like to be in the $30 million range, just in case. Yeah.
It might be helpful to know, I mean, I'm just thinking about growing districts like Woodbury or when we talked about Elk River earlier, like some of these I don't know that we face special circumstances because of that or not, or, I don't know. It would just be good to get actual numbers from some of those districts.
I agree.
Kim? So have we ever been at like 15%?
Not the time I've been here.
I thought there was a period where it was at 12%. You were here.
I was asking 15.
Are we talking Fund balance, or are we talking unassigned fund balance? Because that distinction is incredibly important.
Different.
Unassigned.
Okay.
Any further questions from board members? Okay. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Bill.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item tonight, we have some reports with recommended actions, so I'll have Brenda Albrecht come forward. The first item that we'll be discussing is the non-licensed educators union contract settlement.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Superintendent Baumann, and members of the school board. You have before you this evening the approval of the non-licensed educators tentative agreement. The non-licensed educators have voted to ratify the 23-25 contract settlement. Highlights of the settlement include a $1.10 per hour increase to wages year one and an additional $1.10 per hour year two of the contract, increased additional longevity pay, and an addition of the Juneteenth holiday. The total package cost of the settlement is within board-established parameters at 9.72%. And it is recommended for approval.
Are there any questions from board members on this contract?
Thanks for getting it done.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So hearing that we don't have any questions, do I have a motion to approve the non-licensed educators union contract settlement?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion by Director David Anderson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Our next item up for discussion is the Leaf Union contract settlement.
Yes, the Leaf Union, they have also voted to ratify their contract. This is again for the 23-25 school years. The highlights of the settlement include a 2% increase to wages for each year of the contract, retroactive back to July 1st of 2023. For active and retired employees, longevity was added for years 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25 of employment, an increase to the 403B contributions, and one additional holiday. There was also streamlined language regarding school closings due to inclement weather and flex learning days to reflect new statute that went through in legislation. The total package cost of the settlement is within board-established parameters at 9.56%.
Any questions from board members on this contract? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote, or not put it to vote, sorry, ask for a motion. Do I have a motion to approve the Leaf Union contract settlement?
So moved.
We have a motion by Director Carly Anderson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Director David Anderson. Any further discussion? Director Thompson?
Hey, I want to clarify again. These contracts have been reviewed by the union representatives and those that are part of it. They've already voted yes, and they're asking for the school board to vote yes to have it executed.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Brenda. All right, and we have no additions to the agenda tonight, so that brings us to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Baker.
I need to
Thank
get
you,
that
Chair
done for you.
Baker. Jeez. So I want to start off by sharing and saying thank you to our community. Everyone went out and voted. We appreciate that. And this month, we were obviously pursuing a levy. We titled that Succeeding Together for a referendum. And while our Succeeding Together referendum did not pass, we do remain committed as a administration and as a school district to supporting our students and our staff, and we will continue working with our school board and with our community to figure out what the priority adjustments need to be and plan accordingly. The other thing I'd like to just say publicly to all, as we head into the Thanksgiving holiday, I just want to take a minute and just say thank you to our Lakeville area schools, our staff, for the hard work and dedication. I did make a point of getting into many buildings today, and the atmosphere was amazing. The kids were having fun, the staff was having fun, and if you can come to school and have fun and learn at the same time, I think that's just wonderful. The staff here in our Lakeville area schools are definitely making a difference in the lives of our young people, and I just want to extend a heartfelt gratitude to all of you for what you do. Everybody's, I think, working hard and doing a great job, and I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, and thank you, board members, and I hope that your Thanksgiving is as wonderful as a kindergarten class in our elementary schools. That is my report. Chair Baker.
Thank you so much. We are very thankful for our school district, so thank you. Having completed all the items on our agenda, I would entertain a motion for adjournment for the night.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion by Director Carly Anderson. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Lind. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
We did talk about